The American view was not so new back in 1773. It has roots that run back to Genesis 1 and all through history. So give me your ear if you care to hear the plan for liberty. It covers the span since time began, and it's true for you and me. A tyrannical king is a terrible thing our fathers had to face, but they declared with the faith they shared, law comes from a higher place. I'm singing the American view, I'm bringing the American view. There is a Hello, on behalf of Institute on the Constitution, this is co-founder Michael Anthony Perucca, along with our president, Jake McCauley. By the grace of God, and thanks to your vision and your generosity over the years, the Institute on the Constitution has been able to significantly expand its outreach throughout the country.
For example, IOTC has successfully recruited and trained more than 50 chapter leaders and over 80 active teachers, covering every state in the country. Many of our leaders teach classes in their communities and churches. Others volunteer and speak in public school classrooms. Our curriculum is also used in many home and private schools with the goal of reinvigorating the American culture with an understanding and appreciation of its own history and a commitment to pass on the divine blessings of liberty to future generations of Americans.
We want to continue to create an atmosphere in America where high school students are familiar with the American documents of freedom as well as the biblical foundations from which they are derived, and where students display an appreciation of their constitutional heritage, which is broader and deeper than their knowledge of the Kardashians, where students' knowledge of God's authority and reverence for His moral law is manifested in every pursuit.
And regrettably, modern public education has jettisoned the acknowledgement of God and His authority and has denigrated the memory of the Founding Fathers with predictable results. According to a 2017 national survey by the Annenberg Public Policy, 37% of those surveyed could not name any of the rights guaranteed under the First Amendment. Not one. Only 26% can name all three branches of government, and only 15% of those surveyed could name the freedom of religion. The Institute on the Constitution urgently needs and requests your continued prayers in this battle that is upon us. We are committed and equipped and ready, and when we enter the fight righteously, we win every time we fight. Our current financial needs are modest but pressing. If you have already made a contribution, we want to personally thank you on behalf of the countless Americans you send us to.
If you're currently praying about your commitment, please consider a one-time or a monthly donation that will aid us in our efforts. As always, we pledge to you our sincere resolve and the commitment of our own resources to the restoration of biblically based constitutional government and the restoration of the American Republic. This is Michael Anthony Perucca, founder,
and Jake McCauley, president of the Institute on the Constitution, bringing you the American View.
The American View. There is a God. He gave us our rights. He gave us civil government too. I'm playing the American View. I'm praying the American View. Historically traced, biblically based, it's the genuine American view. Bringing the American view. Yeah, I'm singing the American view. Bringing the
You're asking me?
It's a good question.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't really know.
Democracy.
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 I have no idea.
Democracy.
Democracy.
Democracy, yeah.
What form?
What form of government do we have in the United States?
What form of government do we have in the United States? We have a democracy.
Democracy.
Democracy? Democracy?
Democracy?
Would I be surprised to find that we don't have a democracy?
Yes, no.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I would be surprised. I would be very surprised.
Ooh, when was the last time I said the pledge? When's the last time I said the Pledge of Allegiance?
About 8 years ago. Oh, probably a year ago.
Probably 21 years ago.
Do I remember the words? I think I do. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America,
and to the republic.
for which it stands.
And to the what?
Republic.
And to the what?
Republic.
Republic.
Republic?
Republic?
It's a republic.
That's right, and we are a republic.
Republic.
Republic? Oh, the republic?
The difference.
What is the difference between a democracy and a republic?
What is the difference between a republic and a democracy?
I can't remember spelling.
Jeez, that's a good question.
Don't know the answer.
Oh, good Lord.
Whoa!
You got me there.
I don't know the answer to that.
In the genuine American view. There is a God, our rights come from Him. He is the author of the law. He created governments to secure those rights for us all. But when civil government gets all twisted and bent, the people have a...
Hi, this is Jake with the Institute on the Constitution, and I would like to discuss with you the role of an IOTC chapter leader. Do you have a talent for networking, communicating, or promoting? You can help restore our republic through grassroots education by becoming an IOTC chapter leader for your state. Now, responsibilities of an IOTC state chapter leader include knowing the Institute on the Constitution happenings in your state and being able to connect those interested with events and classes in your state, and then helping report those events and classes to Institute on the Constitution headquarters so that we can keep our event calendar and map updated. Next, you can help draw out future instructors or hosts in your state with the goal of occupying every county of your state. We provide all our chapter leaders with resources to accomplish these duties, and our staff is available and anxious to work one-on-one with you so you're not alone, feeling like you are thrust in the deep end with no life vest. The state chapter leader position is a volunteer position. However, you do have an opportunity to earn commission with our affiliate program to cover your expenses. Now, our affiliate program complements the position of the chapter leader, so there is even a potential to earn an income while working to restore our country. I want to personally thank you for your interest in becoming your state's chapter leader. Click below to inquire and set up an interview. One of our friendly staff is waiting, ready to help you.
American view. There is a God. He gave us our rights. He gave us civil government too. I'm playing the American view. I'm praying the American view. Historically traced, biblically based. It's the genuine American view. Bringing the American view. Yeah, I'm singing the American view. Bringing the American view. I'm playing the American view. Will you sing the American
approach. And I understand that my microphone was off. So let me just go through that again. So welcome to the Institute on the Constitution's First Friday lecture series. My name is Rob McQuay. I'm your host for this evening, and I'm the production manager for IOTC. So all of the audio video products that you find on the site or YouTube or wherever, those are all under my purview. Well, tonight and for the next several months through the summer, we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to replay some of our previous First Friday lectures. Now, we're selecting lectures that are timely and important for the organization. So tonight, we will replay a lecture given by our Dean of Instructors, Ricki Pepin, called Multiplying the Message, the Constitution, and the Principal Approach, Putting Feet on the IOTC. Intended as instructional training for aspiring Institute on the Constitution instructors, Ricki provides in this film tonight insight into how we can restore our constitutional republic through grassroots education. So if you've ever thought, what can I do to help clean up the mess that's going on in our country? Well, this is the lecture for you. And if you know someone that has an interest in spreading this education, invite them to watch. And you can watch this afterwards. After the live stream is done, you can go back to the YouTube channel or the Facebook page and watch this over again. For more in-depth instructor training by Ricki Pepin, you can visit our website. And you can go to theamericanview.com, obviously. And you want to visit the ACT button. You'll see there at the top, ACT. That's a little drop down. And you can go to How to Start a Class. And that will give you what you want to see there. Then also, we have instructor starter kits. They're still in stock. And they're on sale on the website. You have everything you need to start teaching a class in one kit. And you see it's right there. It's in our store. Just look up U.S. Constitution Course Instructor Host Materials, and you can find that. And you can also become a member of the Institute on the Constitution. And you'll find that at the login. If you look at the top there, the login all the way to the right. And when you click that, there's a member portal. And when you go in there, you'll be able to sign up and become a member. Now, I will put all of these items in the chat. They're also in the description, so you can find the links there to get directly to those places. Okay, so now let's just get on to it. Here is Ricki Pepin with Multiplying the Message.
As we seek to retake our country, what essentially must happen is citizens must take the task of teaching fellow citizens what the law is. It's certainly not going to happen from law schools. It's not going to happen in the education system or the media. We, the people, have to take our country back. And that happens as people take the materials that we're producing at Institute on the Constitution and begin teaching in their homes, their churches, their community centers. But it's got to happen more rapidly than we can possibly imagine. We have to multiply ourselves, not only teach a class ourselves, but of those that graduate from our class, teach them how to teach a class. And that's the purpose of this evening. In a sense, you could say we're doing a little inside baseball on tonight's First Friday, because we want to have you hear from one of the hosts who's multiplying herself rapidly in southwestern Ohio, and very exciting to see the number of people graduating out of the classes that have sprung into existence since 2009. Ricki Pepin is a great hero. She has been teaching Institute on the Constitution for more than 14 years, and in that time she has seen just a multiplication that we want to see envisioned all over the country. Would you help me welcome Ricki Pepin to the podium tonight as she shares with us on multiplying the message?
I am so grateful and excited to have the opportunity to share with you today. How many of you have taken the Institute on the Constitution classes? Well, for those of you who have not, this material may not be quite as meaningful. It will make more sense to those of you who have completed the course. However, I'm hoping to fan the flame in all of your hearts who want to know more about your God-given destiny and purpose. I've often been invited to give a talk called, "Why Do I Need to Know the Constitution?" It's an important question, and learning the right answer is changing people's lives. Let me explain. Like you, I have a great love for my country, and it is egregious to me to see our liberties disappearing, sometimes through overt government theft or usurpation, and other times through citizen ignorance and apathy. One of my deepest desires is to get those liberties back. But how do we do that? You know, activism is obviously a key player, but it's got to be educated, it's got to be targeted, and I even want to call it patriotic activism. Well, what do I mean by that? You know, words matter and definitions are important. How many of you consider yourselves to be a patriot? You know, whenever I ask that question, almost every hand goes up. Well, let's see if you're right, according to founding father Noah Webster. One of his many accomplishments in life was to write America's very first dictionary in 1828, and that dictionary has been republished, by the way. To read his definitions is to better understand the minds of our founding fathers. Most of you know that there's a revisionist history movement, but did you also know that there is a revisionist dictionary movement? Definitions are being rewritten, words are being redefined, and does it matter? You better believe it. I have a 1968 Harcourt Brace dictionary at home. Let's look at the word right. And it defines right as conformity to standards or prevailing conditions. How about Noah? What did he have to say about that? He said right was according to the will of God. Just a little difference there. You know, one of them changes with the times. The other is a timeless principle. Words do matter and their definitions do not change. So let's see what Noah said. How did he define patriotism, and see if you fit. He said patriotism is love of one's country. It's the passion which aims to serve one's country either in defending it from invasion or protecting its rights and maintaining its laws and institutions. I want you to zero in on that part. Protecting its rights and maintaining its laws and institutions. Patriotism is the characteristic of a good citizen, the noblest passion that animates a man. Wow, being a patriot is a tall order. It's obviously a whole lot more than waving a flag or putting the right bumper sticker on your car. So let's look at it a little more closely. Just what does it mean to protect and maintain America's laws and institutions? What are our country's laws and institutions? What's the law of our land?
Well, it's the Constitution, obviously.
The Constitution. Do you know what it says? Does it matter? Well, according to this definition, if you want to be a true patriot, it does. For how can you protect, defend, or maintain something that you know little or nothing about? Well, these questions and this definition and this passion were in my heart when I first heard about the Institute on the Constitution, the IOTC. I feel like one of its founding fathers, or maybe I should say founding mothers. I first saw the IOTC materials and met John Eidsmoe, the main instructor, 15 years ago in 1995 when he first published and presented these materials at a conference in Plymouth, Massachusetts. I was there to learn and take some classes offered at the conference and also to be a reenactor, a pilgrim in America's Hometown Parade. It's a yearly event that they have in Plymouth as part of the Thanksgiving Day celebration. And here we are, the Colonel and the Pilgrim. At this conference, as Lieutenant Colonel Eidsmoe presented these IOTC materials, my heart was literally about to beat out of my chest with excitement. I didn't know why. I didn't understand it, but God was letting me know that I had to not only take this class, but I had to learn how to present it as well. For the next 14 years, I made it available to homeschool and church groups or anybody else who would listen. I led classes of about 20 people every other year, sometimes every 3 years, and those who took the course loved it, but you just couldn't generate a whole lot of interest to get them to sign up. Well, fast forward to July 4th, 2009, Independence Day. I was invited to speak at a local Tea Party event in Springfield, Ohio, on the importance of knowing the Constitution. My presentation was very enthusiastically received, and when I stepped off that stage, 14 people surrounded me immediately and said, "I want to take that class." Well, little did I know that this was the birth of a movement that I could never have envisioned, because unlike the classes from my previous years that had been from one homeschool group or the same church, these people they didn't even know each other. They were from all different backgrounds, different churches, different schools. All they had in common was the fact that they had a desire to take this Constitution class and become better patriots. Well, when the class started a few weeks later, registration had grown from 14 to 35, my biggest class ever. By the second week, those new students had spoken with their friends, and 85 more people wanted to take the class. I had never seen anything like this. We started a second class, and before these 2 classes were completed, 5 more classes were scheduled to begin. However, there was a problem. After graduating the first 2 classes of more than 100 people, I realized in conversation with the graduates that they still didn't understand some of the basic concepts of government and the Constitution. Things like the fact that Roe v. Wade is not the law of the land because court doesn't make law. They didn't understand that there are governmental jurisdictions, self-government, family, church, civil government, and that they each have boundaries that the others should not cross. They did not understand that executive orders are not law. They didn't understand the concept of impeaching judges for bad behavior. In short, though they had completed the IOTC course, they still did not qualify as patriots. Remember the definition? People who could protect their nation and its rights by maintaining America's laws and institutions. They couldn't protect or maintain America's law, the Constitution, because though they had studied its contents, they didn't know how to use it. They missed the connection between learning and doing. But their desire was to do something. That's why they took the class. They wanted to help restore America to its foundations, but this was not happening in spite of the fact that they'd completed the course. So I began praying, and I asked God, "Lord, how do I bridge this gap?" And He immediately brought to my memory the method of education that I had discovered while homeschooling my children several years earlier, called the principal approach. This method of education was used by our founding fathers, and rather than simply teaching people what to think, it teaches you how to do research, think, and reason for yourself using a biblical worldview. So I started to pull together materials to incorporate this method into the IOTC classes, not only adding supplemental articles to support the weekly lessons, but also changing the method of teaching and review questions. The difference in the students in the next batch of classes was monumental. They went from interested listeners to passionate participants. Their excitement grew as they began to see that they were understanding the principles of the Constitution, and often better than their own legislators. This brought a new level of confidence, and they began speaking up more with friends, family, and coworkers, and they started to get involved in their local communities and make real changes. Well, excitement grew, and these classes became so popular we could not keep up with the demand of the people who wanted to take them. So I put together a curriculum to teach other people how to teach the IOTC with the principal approach add-ons, and just hoped that maybe a couple folks might show up that might be willing to learn how to do this. Well, to my utter amazement, in my small community, 20 people signed up to take the leadership class. That was bigger than the classes used to be. Since that July 4th, 09 Tea Party talk, there has never been a time when there are not several Constitution classes going on at the same time in Southwest Ohio. And next month in January, we are about to graduate 250 people from 12 different classes. And more people are already signing up for the next round of new classes, and we've got another teacher training scheduled for January. Well, this past June, in the midst of all of this activity, Pastor David Whitney spoke with me and said, "You're graduating more people in these classes in Southwest Ohio than anywhere else in the nation. What are you doing?" Well, I told them that while John Eidsmoe was teaching students about the Constitution, I was teaching them how to use the Constitution. I was putting feet on it by using the principal approach along with the standard curriculum. We help them to learn to talk to their pastors so that we can get this instruction into the churches. You know, the church is a sleeping giant today, and the separation of church and state is a lie that will not stand up against the truth of the First Amendment. We introduce them to organizations that are working at the Constitution level so they will not be misled to waste their time and money helping well-meaning groups that are in reality chasing red herrings like overturning Roe v. Wade. And we do it by using the principal approach. Well, I gave Pastor Whitney some of my materials to bring back to Maryland for the others to review, and apparently they liked what they saw because they asked me to put together a manual with the extra materials and to come here and film this DVD training to accompany it as a supplement for those leaders who want to see similar results with their classes. So here we are, and here we go. Just what is the principal approach, and why is it so effective? How many of you here today have even heard of it? Most people really haven't. It's a brand new concept to them, and I actually call it Restoring America Through Educational Excellence. The principal approach uses 7 biblical principles, definitions from Webster's 1828 dictionary and other primary source documents, and some leading questions. And for the IOT, and it helps you actually to search out the truth in any subject. For the IOTC classes, we were using applications that related especially to government and to history. The method is called the 4 R's. The first one being research, where we use that Bible, Webster's 1828 dictionary, and other primary sources. We don't read about Washington's farewell address. We read Washington's farewell address. We don't read about the Constitution. We read the Constitution. That's a big difference with primary sources. After doing that research, we reason. We use leading questions to identify the truth or sometimes former misconceptions. Then we relate it to history or to a current event or whatever subject is before us. And lastly, we record it. We either write it down or we use it by contacting our congressman or speaking to others with constitutional or principled arguments, not just our opinions any longer. Now, I really want you to understand how powerful this method of teaching is, because I sincerely believe that it is the core reason for our success in these classes. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into it. The principal approach was accidentally endorsed by an organization called the Nehemiah Institute. They're a Christian research organization that was formed in the 1980s for the purpose of returning America to a biblical way of thinking. To that end, they created a test they called the Peers Test. Now, the Peers Test is not academic in nature, but rather it's a diagnostic tool that helps to identify and measure students' worldviews in the area of politics, there's your P, economics, there's your first E, education, the next one, R, religion, and S, social issues. That's the peers. Well, what they expected to do was to dramatically demonstrate the difference in worldviews between Christians in the public school versus Christians in the Christian schools. But what they learned instead was absolutely jolting. The results showed that while the Christian school students slightly surpassed the public school students in their proximity to a biblical worldview, there was one group of schools that was far superior to the average Christian school in its ability to help students develop a scriptural perspective on everything. And they looked at that and they said, who are these guys? Well, on further investigation, they learned that these outstanding schools were using a method called the principal approach. And like most of you here today, the Nehemiah Institute had never even heard of the principal approach. Well, the data from the Peers test was both enlightening and intriguing. While both the public and the Christian schools' biblical worldview was steadily plummeting through the years, further into secular humanism and socialism even, the principal approach students were growing stronger in their biblical worldview. The Peers trend chart shows both of these stark developments very clearly. Let's have a look at the data. You may not be able to see it real well, but the upper right corner has the Peers worldview scale. And this explains the correlation between the test score numbers and the various worldviews. For example, scores over 70 represent a biblical worldview. Scores below 70 identify worldviews in decreasing order as moderate Christian, secular humanism, socialism, and even scores below 0, and yes, you can score below 0, are a Marxist-Leninist worldview. Now, as you can see from this photo, the principal approach schools, which are marked in green, consistently scored not only way above the other schools, but they grew in their understanding of a biblical worldview through the years. They started at 61 and worked their way up to 70. Conversely, both the public and traditional Christian schools declined in their understanding of a biblical worldview as the years passed. Look how low they're getting, starting at 40 and going down into the teens. The schools, public schools starting in the 30s and ending up, I'm not even sure how low that is, like 5 or 6. I mean, it's really going down. Well, to better understand this data, let's have a look at the scoring method so you can see where they're coming up with this, along with the sampling of the statements from the Peers test, which the students are asked when they get these statements to either agree or disagree with them. An example of a statement on the test is, the concept of family, traditionally understood as father, mother, and children, needs to be redefined to include other types of committed relationships. Now, when the students read that, they have to rank their level of agreement or disagreement with it. Another statement, because human nature is constantly changing, values and ethics will also change. Therefore, each generation should be free to adopt moral standards appropriate to their preferences. I hope your blood's starting to boil. Next statement, a primary function of civil government is to enact education and social programs designed to prevent overpopulation of its land. Yikes. Okay, those are the kinds of statements that are in the Peers test, and then here's your scoring method. Your possible answers are either that you strongly agree, you tend to agree, you're neutral, you tend to disagree, or you strongly disagree. And this is where they're getting their scores from. Now, from these statements in this scoring method, the conclusion, the evidence, is both clear and alarming. You know, public and traditional Christian schools are failing to create a biblical worldview in their students. Now, you might expect that in the public school, but that's shocking to find that in the Christian school. But the other evidence was equally clear, but actually inspirational, because the principal approach schools are building citizens who can increasingly think and reason from a biblical perspective, an absolutely essential element in restoring America to its biblical foundations of a limited constitutional government. This is why I chose to incorporate the principal approach into the IOTC materials. We wanted our graduates to be able to think and reason for themselves using a biblical perspective. We didn't want them using just their opinions. We certainly didn't want them to be using what the world was feeding them. And we don't even want them just parroting what we're telling them. Because a man is never truly free until he can think and reason for himself from the right premise. And this brings us back to the original slide, the Constitution and the principal approach, putting feet on the IOTC. Now, I've put something else on the cover, and I'm going to go ahead and just read this one paragraph to you because it's the heart or the intent behind this new manual. It says, the following materials are presented for those leaders of the IOTC who wish to equip their students with practical applications for using their new constitutional knowledge. Please know that this manual is a work in progress. That's my excuse for life. Some recommendations are viewed as essential points and will be marked accordingly. Others are merely suggestions. Each leader is encouraged to personalize these lessons with their own current events or historical articles in order to emphasize various key points. The main objective is to teach the students to begin to think and reason for themselves using the principal approach to education, the method used by our founding fathers. And this method, the principal approach, will be explained and modeled within all of these training materials. That's the end of what's on the cover. So just to cap this off, to further clarify, the materials that I'm going to share with you now are a composite of what already exists with the IOTC host kit and what I have created to put the feet on these lessons. We don't have time in this presentation to go over all 12 lessons in detail. When I do the teacher training, we have 2 90-minute sessions, so you are truly getting the in a nutshell version tonight. But my hope is to be able to present enough details to you to help you see how and why this is so effective and to create some excitement in your heart to want to duplicate it. I have 4 objectives tonight. I want to review the additional administrative details for starting this principal approach IOTC class. I want to overview and demonstrate some of the teaching points that use the principal approach. I want to overview some of the extra documents and books that we use in these lessons. And lastly, I want to compare a modern education lesson with a principal approach lesson so you can see the stark difference between the two. Now we're actually going to walk through a couple lessons, specifically viewing some of the principal approach additions line upon line so that you can better grasp how this works. Remember, please, that the overall objective of this is to equip the leaders to eventually personalize it, not necessarily to copycat everything that is presented. However, if the leaders do need to copycat it until they become more comfortable using this method, all of these applications are written out in detail in the teacher's manual. So our first objective is to look at the extra administrative details. I'd let everybody know, welcome, you are a patriotic partner in America's Restoration Project. One of the things that we almost insist as an essential tool for the leaders is this 1828 dictionary. It's about $60. We tell them where they can get it. We're not requiring it. This is obviously a volunteer effort, but you're really hamstringing yourself if you don't get it. So we really strongly urge them to get that 1828 dictionary. The students will be encouraged through the lessons to get 2 other books that we use, one called The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope, the other The Watchman on the Wall, Pastors Equipping Christians for Their Civic Duties. We'll give you a little bit more information on those in the lessons in which they appear. Now, leaders are also told that they need to become constitutionally connected. They're encouraged to subscribe to an online constitutionally grounded organization's mailing list that will send them a wide variety of current events and legislative alerts. They can use this for their personal edification as well as forwarding selected articles to their classes. They're advised to choose this organization wisely and then selectively forward some of the articles to their classes, always avoiding partisanship and always emphasizing principles. And then I give my 2 best recommendations, the American Policy Center and the Heritage Foundation, and the information for getting those if they choose. You know, they can pick their own, but the bottom line is we want them to get on one that's dependable, and these 2 are good. Now, the leaders are also instructed to create an email distribution list and send all information as a blind copy so as to protect the privacy of their students' emails. And the students are also always given an option to opt out of the legislative alert mailings. The current event and featured articles are required, but the legislative alerts are not. And the reason is these classes attract individuals from all spectrums of the political sphere, and we don't want them to think that they're being railroaded into a particular political ideology. We are nonpartisan, but to date, nobody has ever asked to be taken off of that legislative alert list. And I think this just underscores the students' deep-seated desire to really make a difference in restoring America. Okay, our second objective is we're actually going to walk through Lesson 1, specifically highlighting the integration of the principal approach as we go. Okay, we do the normal, taking the attendance and get their books to them. We open with the prayer and the pledge, and we tell them, because we're not always at churches, and so we tell them we're opening with prayer because we are following the example of both our founding fathers historically, as well as Congress and the Supreme Court to this day open in prayer, and so that's why we do that. And once again, people are sometimes they're a little uncomfortable with that at first, but when you let them know, hey, this is today, this is history, and this is what we're doing, they're okay with it. Then we get into the talking points. We really want to inspire and validate why they are taking this class. And so we tell them, you know, the Tea Parties were a springboard. They were voters expressing their outrage with the government and their deep concern about what was happening in the long-term economic health of this country. But where did they go from there? Where did that anger go to? Well, where we suggest we need to take it is to education. But nonpartisan education again. We are about principles, we are about history, we are about definitions. The next thing is we are about, with the principle approach, leading questions, answers, and definitions. This is where you're going to see the principle approach in action. You will ask the class questions and you'll wait for answers. You'll be defining some of your terms using that Webster's 1828 dictionary. For example, just as I did when you came here today, you will ask your class, how many of you consider yourselves to be patriots? And I'll guarantee you every hand's going to go up in that room. And so you say, well, here we go. Let's check out and see what Noah said about that. And you read them that same definition. Patriotism is love of one's country, the passion which aims to serve it, either in defending it from invasion or protecting its rights and maintaining its institutions in vigor and purity. And then ask them questions and wait for the answers. For example, what is the law of the land? They're going to know that. Where are your rights listed? Sometimes this slows them down a little bit. Give them a minute. Anybody know where your rights are listed? God's Word. And we're looking at the Bill of Rights as well for our governmental documents. And once again, how can we protect or maintain our rights and our laws, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, if we don't know what they say? And the answer is obviously we can't. So from there, we're going to go into examples, stories, and key points. Again, solidifying the importance of constitutional knowledge versus opinion when you contact your legislators. We let them know that elected officials at every level of government take an oath when they are elected to office, and they say, quote, I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, so help me God. The point that I want you to understand and that we tell them is whenever an elected official supports a policy or legislation that is unconstitutional, they are breaking that oath, they are breaking the law. You do not just have a difference of opinion, and there's a huge difference. When we question candidates, rather than asking their stands on various issues, there's only one question that we really need to ask, and that is, do you view the Constitution from its original intent or as a living document? If they cannot give you the right answer to that question, then you probably don't want to vote for them. And the right answer, by the way, I hope you know, is original intent, but I figured most of you already knew that. The next thing that we do is we let them know that we are going to give them applications. They are going to be able to use what they learn in this class. We are going to provide them with names of constitutionally focused groups for information, affiliation, or support. We are going to provide them with factual email legislative alerts, again, sent as blind copies to protect their email security. We are going to give them weekly featured articles. They can use those articles just to educate themselves, or sometimes they can use them as opportunities to get involved in their local, state, or national governments. And again, we always give the students the opportunity to opt out of those legislative alerts. We're going to recommend those 2 short books for them to read to solidify their jurisdictional understanding. Again, we'll be talking about those later. Now, the next thing we do, let's talk about, is the weekly featured articles. These articles are a big piece of the puzzle where we start to use the principle approach and put the feet on these lessons. These articles include definitions and principles that relate to both the lesson and current events. And this is the principal approach in action, and it begins the process of teaching the students how to think for themselves from a biblical worldview. Each week's lesson includes 1 to 3 articles that will be emailed to the students, usually prior to class time. They're clearly marked on the CD for when they're to be sent and which lessons they belong with. These are always reviewed in class, sometimes briefly, sometimes in great detail. It just depends on where you want to put the emphasis. But as an example, let's look at the first email that your class is going to be receiving. It's called Christians in Politics. A lot of these people are experiencing tremendous mental conflict about their desire to be involved in politics. This is the first time they've ever done anything like this, and they believe that politics is largely about greed and power. And that's something that Christians should absolutely avoid. And yet they see the mess that they're in, and they wonder, what are they supposed to do with this conflict? Well, here is Noah Webster to the rescue. 1828 definitions bring out truth. I read this to them. They get this in a take-home email, but I also read it in class to them. The definition of politics is the science of government, that part of ethics, which consists in the regulation and government of a nation or state for the preservation of its safety, peace, and prosperity, also for the protection of its citizens in their rights, and listen to this part, with the preservation and improvement of their morals. That's the definition of politics. Now, let me ask you, after I read that question, or I ask the class, who's better equipped to preserve and improve morals? You know, Christians with a biblical worldview or non-Christians? Well, the answer is obvious. So therefore, which of these two groups should be involved in politics? Absolutely. And all of a sudden, you have freed them to be excited about where they are instead of feeling guilty or conflicted about where they are just by a definition. The next article that we send to them that week is called The Necessary Mindset of a Patriot, and it emphasizes the idea of long-term commitment, that we don't need to do this. It's not a quick fix, it's a lifestyle. Continuing with Lesson 1, we then get into an overview of the student workbook so that they get more familiar with it. We get into giving them their weekly reading assignments. One of them, obviously, is the Joseph Sobran article. We also look back, when we look at the law, that wonderful article that's in the back, that wonderful, monstrously long article that's in the back of the book, it's just overwhelming. And so once again, I ask the question, how do you eat an elephant? That's it. And they all know that, one bite at a time. And so that's what we're going to do. We break that gigantic article into weekly assignments of only about 1 to 2 pages per week, and then we review what the principles of what they read on a weekly basis. So we break it in so they can use it. Next thing, obviously, that we're going to do is watch the videos and then go over the lecture review questions, the test questions, the true or false. We skip the questions for discussion the first week just because they're too deep and the class isn't ready for them yet, and they're still shy, they don't know each other. But here is where the rubber meets the road. The points to ponder or emphasize, or the essential points. This is what I've added, and this is where the principal approach really takes off. These are your prime principal approach teaching moments, and they're going to be tied to specific questions from the student manual. And the most basic elements of them are leading questions, research, again, from definitions from Webster's 1828 and other primary sources, and then learning how to reason, relate, and record to get to the applications or the conclusions or the key points of these things. So these essential points are written out in detail in every lesson plan on this CD in the manual. And you can follow them exactly, or you can come up with your own, but it is the combination of the method and the content of this teaching that begins to equip the student to think for themselves from a biblical perspective. For example, doing the research, the host manual declares on page 12, there's a true or false statement that says, according to Blackstone, law is valid only if it conforms to the revealed law and the law of nature, true or false. Well, the class always goes true. Well, they get it right, but you know what? Most of them don't have a clue what they just said. They really don't understand those phrases, and those are foundational in importance. And so I instruct the class that the founders used the phrase, the laws of nature and nature's God, in the Declaration of Independence, meaning the same thing that Blackstone did by revealed law. But the important question here is, what are the laws of nature and nature's God? Now, if they don't know the answer to this question, they cannot understand the very nature and foundation of all law. So we break it into pieces for them and we ask, okay, what is the law of nature's God? And if that's too hard, what is the law of God? By the time we get it down to that level, they're getting the idea, oh, it's the 10 Commandments. Is it written down? Of course, it's in the Bible. And so that's what I said, we break it down and they eventually come up with the right answer if we just keep making the question a little more direct until I get there. But now, the next one is the toughie. What are the laws of nature? Now, few people are going to be able to articulate that, even if they know it. But once again, it's a critical point that they've got to understand, and so I bring it up for them. Noah Webster's 1828 defines it. He says, the law of nature is a rule of conduct arising out of the natural relations of human beings established by the Creator and existing prior to any positive or written precept. In other words, it is a law of nature that one man should not injure another, and murder and fraud would be crimes independent of any written prohibition from the supreme power. The conclusion here is, in other words, the laws of nature are intuitively and instinctively known to man. They do not have to be written out. They are written on his heart. They are written on his conscience. And I ask them if they still can't quite wrap around that. When you were raising your children, when a 2-year-old goes into a room and there's other kids with toys and he goes over and he grabs one of the kids' toys, he runs. Why? Did he read in a piece of paper someplace that it's not right to take that? He just knew. That is the law of nature. It is written on his heart. He knew from the beginning that that was the wrong thing to do. That is an example of the law of nature. Well, now that they've got the foundation down, let's bring it to a modern day application. Let's relate it. And I ask them, does legalizing abortion fit this requirement of being according to the laws of nature and nature's God? And of course, the obvious answer is no, it doesn't. Next question is, does taking money from your paycheck and giving it to someone else through welfare, entitlement, or other programs meet this requirement? No. What is that? It's stealing, and that's intuitively obvious, and that one is written down. Now, there's another opportunity here within this lesson to reinforce this point that we just made. Once again, in the host manual, page 12, another true or false statement says, one of the purposes of government is to enforce God's standard of right and wrong, and true or false. And of course, they're going to say, well, that's true. Okay, and so I ask them again, and so what did we just find out? What is the foundation of all law? And you're hoping they're going to come back with the laws of nature and nature's God. Okay, now this next point is a hot topic, but it's so important to address because this is a revelation moment to a lot of these people. They are realizing that their tax dollars are being spent for unlawful activities. Not just that they don't like them, but they're actually unlawful. They're not according to the laws of nature and nature's God, which always brings up the next question. And it's like, but the Bible says we're supposed to obey the governing authorities. How do we reconcile this command with obeying laws that are outside of the laws of nature and nature's God? Well, first of all, this is one reason why it is so important to have Christians as legislators. And not just Christians, but Christians who have a true biblical understanding of God and government. And the next series of questions and definitions and conclusions, in other words, research, reason, relate, record, it's all written down in the teacher's manual, but we're just going to go over it verbally here today. I have them read, or I read, actually I have somebody there read Romans 13:1, which says, "Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God." Now, I want to clarify for them what government authority means by discovering the difference between power and authority. And Noah Webster, to the rescue again, defines power simply as exerting force. Authority, on the other hand, is legal power. And legal brings us right full circle back to according to the laws of nature and nature's God. And the ultimate conclusion is that government officials who are ruling within the boundaries of the laws of nature and nature's God are acting under God's authority. Government officials who are ruling outside the boundaries of the laws of nature and nature's God are acting in power, not legal authority. And you are not required to obey them. However, disclaimer, at this point in history, I tell them, re-education, they are acting in power right now, and chances are if you start to disobey those laws, you're going to find yourself in a jail cell. And education of yourself, re-education of yourself, your family members, and your legislators is more important right now than you going to jail. You need to learn the truth, you need to tell others, and then you need to work to find legislators who will legislate within the laws of nature and nature's God. Okay, take a breath. Whew, this is heavy stuff. I mean, you have just laid in Lesson 1 an incredible foundation that the whole rest of the class is now going to build upon. And after we complete this discussion, it's pretty heavy, and so we lighten up a little bit by getting to know each other and building a little camaraderie. I ask each one of the students, give them 30 seconds to give us their name, their occupation, and why they're taking the class. And as they do, I tell my leaders, validate them, encourage them. If you get a grandma that says, "Oh, I don't want my kids to say, Grandma, why didn't you do something someday?" or "Why didn't you stop this?" I encourage them to say, "Here you are, you're doing it." And as they go around the room, you're going to see blue-collar workers, white-collar workers, retired people, young people. And the bottom line, again, is we don't have to be uniform to be unified. And we are going to just work together. We're going to learn a lot of stuff. We're going to accomplish some great things in this class. So, finally, we dismiss, we remind them of their reading assignments, and we close in prayer. And make your prayer for them personal. You know, every one of those people there has a destiny in their lives, just like you do. And when I pray for them, I pray for God to reveal that to them and help them to walk out that destiny as they begin to learn these things in this class and take it to other people. And I get just hugs afterwards from people for the way I pray for them. So don't be afraid to make it personal. Okay, that's Lesson 1. That's huge. Now you can begin to see why these classes are so popular, because we are not just sharing opinions. We're using the principle approach. We are searching out truth. We define our terms. We look at Bible verses. We reason, relate, and record what we found in relation to current events, the Constitution, or other government foundations. We stir up their hearts and their minds. Just this first lesson literally peels the blinders off people as they begin to understand their utter lack of knowledge and understanding about some very important things regarding the laws of nature, God, government, and Christians' involvement in politics. So let's buzz on to Lesson 2. We're going to go through this one faster. Once again, we take the attendance and we do the prayer, we do the pledge, and then we get to the talking points. This is where the things that are going to be coming up in red, I did that because that's what I've added. That's what's in addition to the current materials that are out there. We highlight some of the principles that were in the law that week. We give them their next reading assignment for the following week. And then we get into the featured articles for the week. The second week, we are wanting to explain to them that we're giving them a list of constitutionally focused groups and why it's so important that they align themselves with them rather than, it's the difference between going after a branch on a tree or going after the root of the tree. And I tell them that when the health care bill was being debated in Congress, I got emails legislative alert emails from several Christian organizations, which I will not name them, but you would know them if I did. Well-meaning people telling me to call your congressman and tell him to get the abortion language out of the health care bill. Well, no, that's a branch. The root is stop the health care bill. It's unconstitutional. Well, is it really that important? Well, let's find out. Let's go through a series of questions and find out how important branches versus roots are by looking at Roe versus Wade, the famous Supreme Court decision in 1973 that was declared that Roe v. Wade, that decision made abortion legal throughout all 50 states. We're going to go through some leading questions to expose the importance of constitutional knowledge by researching, reasoning, relating, and recording. First question I want to ask you, is Roe v. Wade the law of the land? No. Some say no, some say yes. Well, let's qualify and see. Let's check it out constitutionally and see what we find out. What are the three branches of government?
Legislative, executive, and judicial.
Very good. They always know that. It's funny, no matter how much government class they slept through, they always know that. Okay, next question. Which one of those branches makes the law?
Only the legislature.
There you go. Which branch does the Supreme Court belong to?
The judiciary.
Can the judicial branch make law?
No, never.
At this point, your class is going to be looking at you like the classic deer in the headlights. Their mouths are going to be falling open. They're going to either think you're a heretic or stupid, one or the other. And so I say, okay, I know this is hard because you've been told for 30-something years that this is true. So let's use another example to help you wrap around the truth here. Who's heard of Stella Liebeck? Oh, I'm amazed. Nobody else ever has. So I tell them, they're looking at like, who's Stella Liebeck? I say, well, in 1994, Stella Liebeck ordered a 49-cent cup of coffee from McDonald's. At this point, everybody's going, oh, because now they know. She proceeded to accidentally spill it on herself, and she got some pretty serious burns. She sued McDonald's, and she won $2.86 million. Does that mean that every person who now accidentally spills coffee on themselves at McDonald's is entitled to $2.86 million? I don't think so. Who did that court decision apply to? To Stella Liebeck and to McDonald's. Who does Roe v. Wade apply to? To Roe and to Wade. It's that simple. Courts don't make law. The conclusion is you have been lied to for years, and it's a shame because it's well-meaning organizations. They don't even know they're lying, but they are perpetuating a lie that has been put forth. And we need to work smart, not hard, and waste millions of dollars and volunteer hours on red herrings. While we continue with Lesson 2, we watch the video, review the test questions, points to ponder, etc., dismiss with a reminder of their reading assignment, and we pray. And I let them know that they will be receiving an email this week called Roe v. Wade, Law of the Land, and that's going to have a website on it for them to go to that they can look at to confirm what we shared in class, as well as more facts that they can read about it to really help them wrap around that. Now, this is an essential point for you. You've got to know your class, know your audience. For the first couple of lessons or so, you may want to be sure to fill in those lecture review, fill-in-the-blank questions with them. However, the students have those answers in the back of their manuals. And as the weeks go by, they're going to be more and more open to discussion questions and want to discuss things with you with these featured articles because they're getting emboldened with this new information that you're giving them. And so I encourage them at some point in time, whether it's the second lesson, whether it's the sixth lesson, to fill in those lecture review answers on their own. And only you can judge the maturity level of your students to know when they're ready to make that transition. But remember that one of your main goals in these classes is to teach the students how to begin to think and reason for themselves. And these leading questions with controlled discussion is a very valuable tool to engage the students' brains. And as I just stated, you can use both the questions in their manual as well as the current events to do this, but always look for the constitutional and the biblical principles that you're wanting to look through when you're looking for your evaluation points. Okay, that's the end of the first two lessons. And I'm now going to go through very briefly all 12. I can't go through all of them, I should say, because your brain would be fried and my mouth would be dry. But we are going to go just show you some of the highlights of them. Basically, this is the format of the class again: the attendance, prayer pledge, talking points, reading assignments. We add the featured articles, watch the video, answer the questions. We add the points to ponder or emphasize with the principal approach applications, and then we dismiss them in prayer. Now, that's, as I said, the basic format. The red is what I've added, and I really want to underscore the value of both of these tools being used together. The original IOTC materials with Colonel Eidsmoe and David Barton, and then putting the feed on them, the principal approach method of instruction, with using the primary source documents, defining the terms, asking the leading questions, etc. This combination is extremely successful in teaching people how to begin thinking and reasoning and building a biblical worldview. They will remember more of what they are learning because they're involved in the learning process by asking them questions, not just lecturing them. It also motivates them to use what they're learning because they feel more confident now in explaining what they believe. They're taking ownership of it. They're no longer just expressing opinions because now they know the truth of the Bible. They know what the definition says. They know what the Founding Fathers' original writings had to say on the subject. Okay, let's move on to Objective 3, which is to overview the featured articles just real quickly and the extra documents that we use in each lesson. Some of these are primary source documents, some of them are current events, but all of them undergird the weekly lessons to help the student better understand how to use the Constitution and start thinking for themselves from that biblical worldview. Lesson 3 includes supplemental articles quoting the Founding Fathers' statements, clearly showing that they were Christians, not deists. Another is the first 4 lines of the Constitution, the preamble, along with 38 biblical principles that refer to those, again, clearly demonstrating the Christian nature of the document. Lesson 4 is all about worldviews. The supplemental articles include a comparison of the United States versus the United Nations philosophy. A second article lists the top 10 objectives of the Communist Manifesto, some of which are in place in America today. Scary. The third is about the birth of socialism in America. That article is so powerful, I literally read it out loud to the class. Lesson 5. Featured article clarifies the 4 jurisdictions of government: self, family, church, and civil, along with definitions and a listing of each responsibilities and where they lie. This is earth-moving. People have never heard this before, and it really helps them to begin to reason through where the civil government should be involved and where it should not be involved. Lesson 6 contains critical information about the United Nations Agenda 21 or Sustainable Development, how to recognize it in your community, and clear instructions on how to combat it. This is also the lesson where we bring in Sheriff Mack's book, County Sheriff, America's Last Hope, and we introduce it once again with leading questions. And we ask them, first of all, have you heard of Sheriff Mack? Very few of them have. But then we say, have you ever heard of the Brady Bill? Well, most of them know about the Brady Bill. And if they haven't, we let them know it was what was passed by the federal government requiring local authorities to do expensive background checks. Well, the bigger question is, did you know that it was overturned by the Supreme Court? And they don't. That didn't hit the headlines. Go figure. And we let them know that Sheriff Mack, one little county sheriff, took on the entire Clinton administration and won. You know, one person can make such a difference. And then, do you understand the authority of your local county sheriff? We go into the details of how much power he has to protect you from overreaching federal government. Lesson 7 sends home a national treasure. We give them primary source document, Washington's farewell address. along with 2 weeks to read it because it's long and it's hard. Another supplemental article for Lesson 7 uses a primary source document from the 1700s teaching students how to do good research, and it deals with what the founders meant by natural-born citizen. Very enlightening article. That one really gets them up in arms too. I want to do another demonstration to show you how we take the students through some of these review questions in the student manual and tie them to the current events. In Lecture 7, it covers both Articles 2 and 3 of the Constitution, the executive and the judicial branches, respectively. I have someone pick up a host manual and turn to page 57 and go to the true or false statement, which says, the President may recommend legislation, but Congress must introduce it. And they're like, well, that's true. Okay, well, that's not earth-shattering, but let's take it to a practical a modern-day application using the principle approach. And I ask them, so from what we just said, can the President make law? Why not? And usually they'll say, well, he's not in the legislative branch. Okay, well, how about his cabinet? Can his cabinet members make law? Oh, well, no. Well, why not? Well, they're not in the legislative branch either. Here comes the bomb. Can his czars make law? You can hear a pin drop. All of a sudden they realize, what the heck is a czar? He has a cabinet. Why does he need czars? And what is a czar? A one-word definition for czar. Anybody got one? Tyrant. That's a good one. But the one in, again, Webster's, the one word they use, it's less offensive, but it really is just as offensive. It's king. A king is an anathema to a constitutional republic. I mean, these guys are not only are they illegal, but they're setting up illegal programs. They're spending how much money? Bottom line, czars are unconstitutional. Well, they're hot now. They are really upset. But we're just going to turn up the heat a little more. That was Article 2. Let's look at Article 3, the judicial branch. Host manual, one of the questions states, the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction in, and the answer is some matters only. Well, we use this just as a teaching moment springboard to go into a modern day story again to relate it. And we briefly recap the story of Eric Holder, the U.S. Attorney General for Obama, who just recently sued the state of Arizona for their immigration laws. Susan Bolton, U.S. District Court judge, ruled against Arizona, and they are probably going to be appealing to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. We all know that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is in all likelihood going to side once again with or against Arizona. And so I asked the class, if Arizona loses at this level, what is their next step? And the obvious answer is, well, they're going to appeal it to the Supreme Court. Boom, you got them. I have somebody turn, and I'll ask you right now, please, to turn to page 223 in your student manual and read out loud Article 3, Section 2, second paragraph, first sentence, please. In all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and councils, and those in which a state shall be a party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. And then I just wait. And I just watch the transformation. It's like a wave just going across the class as that starts to sink in. Well, but, and then I start throwing questions at him to throw a little more fuel on the fire. And I say, how is it that the head, the United States Attorney of the entire nation, didn't know he was filing that case in the wrong court? How is it that a U.S. district judge didn't know she had no business listening to that case because it was in the wrong court? How is it that the governor of Arizona didn't have one single attorney on her staff who could tell her, that's the wrong jurisdiction, we don't have to respond to that? This is a huge revelation moment for them. They are not only angry, but they just understood. They read the Constitution and they got it. They understood it. It wasn't hard. And all of a sudden, when I tell them, you are more qualified to run for political office than the vast majority of people who currently hold office, now they can believe me. Before, they look at you like, no, I can't do that. And now they're saying, I can do that, because they just did it. They just reasoned through it themselves. Moving on, Lesson 8 supplement. is an article about the dangers of a constitutional convention. Another important topic, man, it is coming up all over in conservative circles, and so we've got to clearly spell out the dangers of that. Lesson 9, another biggie. In addition to the John Eidsmoe lesson this week, David Barton gives a fantastic expose on the myth of the separation of church and state. And this is when we give our second book recommendation, The Watchman on the Walls, Pastors Equipping Christians for Their Civic Duties. Once again, asking them questions. Do you understand the twofold nature of Christ's Great Commission? Actually, I asked them, do you know what the Great Commission is? And most of them do, and they'll tell me. That it's to, baptize people in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And then they stop. I said, well, you know what? You did what most churches do. You stopped. There's more. Jesus didn't stop there. He continued to say, and teach all the things I taught. It's an evangelistic and a cultural mandate. And this book, Jesus taught on family relationships. Jesus taught on education. Jesus taught on finances, on government. He taught about all of these things, and this book goes into that. And then I asked them, do you know who the Black Brigade was? And I tell them briefly the story of the Black Brigade as being the most feared regiment by the British during the War for Independence. And it was not a racial term, but rather it referred to the black-robed clergy who were instilling biblical principles of freedom and self-government into the hearts of colonists so deeply that these farmers and merchants were willing to go up against the strongest military power in the world. When the British soldiers entered a town during this time, the first building they destroyed was the church. Why? Because it posed such a threat to them. Today, a tyrannical government has very little to fear from the church, but I want to start to change that. Let's get this book, let's read it. It's only 60 pages long. It is a little stick of dynamite. So let's get it, read it, and pass it on to our pastors. I also include with it a list of patriotic sermons and founding era sermons, and I read these topics and say, when's the last time you heard preached from the pulpit civil disobedience? Right to resist tyranny. How about the laws of nature and nature's God? And they're like, whoa, I don't think I've ever heard any of that. Well, then you're not getting the whole gospel. Okay, week 10, we send home a class evaluation that they fill out and bring back to us. It's structured in a way to help us figure out our strong points and weak points, and it's really encouraging to the leaders because you're going to get some high marks and be really excited as you see they're loving the class and what you're teaching them. Lesson 11, they're assigned that short writing project in your IOTC regular manual. The most important thing I can do as a result of this class is, and I asked them to bring that essay to class with them and have a couple of them share it. Now, this week's featured articles to be emailed to them include the principal approach and the peers test results. And class, we present these in detail, much the same as I did at the beginning of this presentation. And afterwards, we do a walk through a modern day history lesson on the Pilgrims and compare it with the principal approach, primary source materials, because it provides a graphic illustration of revisionist history and why it's so critical to take back our educational system, not just changing the curriculum, but even the method of teaching. And this is the reason I share this with them. So fasten your seatbelts, here we go. At home in Ohio, I have a beautiful 1,000-page teacher's textbook entitled United States Government, Democracy in Action. The title alone should tell you there's going to be problems with this book. Now we're going to take a quotation from this book teaching about the Pilgrims, and we're going to compare it to 3 primary source documents that would be used in the principal approach if you were to study the Pilgrims today. This textbook says, the signers of the Mayflower Compact had very little experience in law. Most had merely been subjects of the king. The Pilgrims had to improvise according to what they felt was right under the circumstances when they landed in America. Okay, my first point, I want to define our terms. Did anybody recognize the definition that we used at the beginning of this talk? Remember, right being conformity to standards or prevailing conditions? And they just told these kids that the Pilgrims had to improvise according to what they felt was right under the circumstances. There's your revisionist dictionary definitions right there. And not only that, this is perverting the memory of some very strong people, very principled people. They knew what they were doing. They knew exactly what they were doing. And as a matter of fact, that's my next bullet down here, is, right is according to the will of God. The truth is the Pilgrims knew exactly what they were doing. They were advancing the Christian faith and establishing this new nation as they stated, as they wrote down in the Mayflower Compact. It was not a mystery to them. They did not have to guess. The second point that they made was that the Pilgrims had very little experience in law. Oh, really? Gutenberg's printing press came to be in about 1450, and one of the most significant things that happened as a result of that was that Bibles got into the hands of the common man for the first time in history. In 1602, the Pilgrims were such big students of the Bible that they actually began writing notes of what their commentaries were of various scriptures, and they printed their own Bible called the Geneva Bible, where they had their commentaries alongside of scripture. And they studied everything, including the law. Romans 13, that passage we read earlier, one of the conclusions that they came to, they said the tyranny of the Pope over all kingdoms must come down to the ground. That's a little inflammatory. King James wasn't a Catholic, so maybe they could have gotten some brownie points from him on that one, but never fear, they went a little further and they found something about kings and magistrates, and they said the magistrates themselves are put in mind of that duty which they owe to their subjects. Whoa! Well, as you can imagine, the Pilgrims not only didn't have many friends, but this is when the persecution became so strong against them that some of them were arrested and hung on meat hooks in London Tower until they died. Now, those are pretty principled people, and I don't think they had very little experience in law. I think they knew it, they believed it, and they practiced it even to the point of death. This is so dishonoring to them, so dishonoring to them. And the last resource, primary source I want to use, is from William Bradford. William Bradford was the first governor, came over on the Mayflower, and he wrote a book called Of Plymouth Plantation, and you can get it today on Amazon anywhere. And these people suffered the persecutions for their writings, as I said, but I want to ask you one more question first. What is the reason that you were taught in school that the Pilgrims came to America?
Economic liberty.
Or for religious freedom. You hear religious freedom. Well, you know what? They had religious freedom. They left England in 1608. Actually, they tried to leave before then, but they weren't allowed by the king, and so they had to sneak out in the dead of night. They hired a ship's captain to sneak them away. He betrayed them, had them all arrested, and it took another year before they could try and gather enough money and do it again. They succeeded that time, went to Holland, and for the next 12 years, barely eked out a living while they were watching their children be lost into the Dutch society, which was a very unprincipled society. They decided at that point in time that they needed to come to America. They had freedom of religion. They had freedom of everything. They were concerned about losing their children to the next generation. So once again, the statement was made, most had merely been subjects of the king. No, they hadn't been subjects of the king for 12 years. Wanted to come for religious freedom? No, they had religious freedom. They wanted to advance the kingdom of God. That's why they came here. You know, this is the difference between primary source documents and reading what's in a school textbook today. Not only outrageous distortions, but lies. And I let the folks know at this point in time in the class that if they want more information on the principal approach, that they can get it, and it's available on those emails that I sent to them. Okay, let's wrap up. Lesson 12, the two final featured articles. The last document I wrote is called the Final Take-Home Points, that include what I believe are the most important definitions and the key points from the 12 lessons. And the last article I give them is one called Freedom Threats, that helps them to discern with more wisdom which organizations and causes to affiliate themselves with. Very well researched article by Tom DeWeese from the American Policy Center. We cap it all off with a graduation ceremony, which is really another learning opportunity when Pastor David Whitney flies out to join us on a Saturday morning and gives the graduates his incredible lecture about the power of a juror. Now, I want to close by telling you the teacher's manual for this Constitution and the Principal Approach is on a CD. It's organized with individual files for the weekly lessons for the leaders and all the featured articles that are to be emailed and accompany each lesson. They're all numbered. It's really easy to follow. I know that I've given you a lot of material here, but I can promise you that I don't want you to be overwhelmed, because the people who sign up for this class are going to be so enthusiastic about what they're learning that they're not going to care if you stumble a little bit until you get comfortable with this material. I just tell every class that I'm a work in progress. I'm going to close with this. Freedom isn't free, and you know that. There is a cost. Are you willing to step out of your comfort zone so that others can become educated enough to make a difference and begin to take back our freedoms? America without freedom is like a body without a soul. Remember the definition of patriotism. It's a noble passion that animates a man. It moves him to action. We, the people, have the duty to restrain a government that is operating outside constitutional boundaries. As Americans, we have a heritage and a birthright that are worth fighting for. Won't you join me in the cause of preserving our God-given liberty and restoring our constitutional republic? Because if you don't defend liberty, who will?
Well, okay, that was some pretty great stuff. Few of you have commented that that was outstanding and loved the presentation. Ricki's just such a great instructor and really has had a vision for this whole thing. So I hope you were inspired to get out there and start educating people about the real Constitution and our role as citizens in recovering the American view of law and government. Now, if you have questions or comments, we're going to ask that you put them in the chat, or better yet, revisit the live stream after it's finished, and then add your questions or your comments in the comments section of the video on YouTube or on Facebook. And we will monitor those comments and questions during the next week, and we'll get one of our experts to reply within this coming week. So we didn't open in prayer, but let's close in prayer. Father God, we are so thankful for the many gifts that you've given us, Lord. We thank you for the Institute. We thank you for those minds that you have inspired to orchestrate all of the teaching and study and education that we're able to get. We thank you for Ricki, Lord, and the message that she has brought, the discernment that you have given her, Lord. We also thank you for Michael and Pastor Whitney for guiding them as well. Now, Lord, we commit our time to you, and Father, we ask that you would guide each one of us as we consider what it is that we can do to help restore our constitutional republic. And we pray these things through Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay, again, thanks for being here. Come back next month, June. That's June 3rd, 7 p.m. Eastern. And got a special one for you. Michael Peruka will be giving you the separation of church and state, the truth and the lie. And you don't want to miss that one. So, God bless you and have a great evening. Thanks.